Hello again, and welcome to Kabbalah Revealed. I'm Tony Kozenek. In this lesson, we'll begin the first of two lessons on free will. We'll look at what it is, where it exists. Free will is an extremely important topic, and when we give classes to new students on the basic concepts of Kabbalah in a live situation, what we like to do is to hand out a questionnaire and have them answer a few questions so that they can keep a record of what their perception of things is at the beginning of these lessons, and then they can look at it later and see how their perceptions have changed. And one of the questions that's asked is, where do I have freedom of choice? And almost without exception, hundreds upon hundreds of students, and that's all of them, answer, I have freedom in everything. Because that's basically what this level of awareness is. The belief that we can choose everything. And that is so because on this level, the Creator is completely hidden. In other words, we don't really have any sense of the laws that create and govern our situations. But knowing what freedom is extremely important because we spend a tremendous amount of effort pursuing things and building things, perhaps over an entire lifetime, based on what we think is an expression of our essence, something that we've chosen to be and build. Maybe for some people it's spirituality, for other people it's other things. But how can you express what your essence is if you don't really know what your I is? The search for the I, what is my I, is really the search for that point of freedom, the experience of not to be restricted by what is not me, not to be coerced by forces outside of the I, and to be able to direct the path of my life along the lines of what it is that I desire, to have the desired outcome that was intended. In previous lessons, we've already learned that we are affected by both inner and outer forces in the whole structure of creation. And these inner and outer parameters are always working on us. And the inner force, the inner parameter that is working on us is the fact that we work in a very narrow corridor between seeking out pleasure and avoiding pain. And this is the inner forces of my programming. But we really underestimate the effect of our created nature, of our will to receive. It is so powerful in terms of how we respond to things that we act really like a robot in every situation as long as we're functioning according to that program. Because we may think that we are choosing to do certain things, but we can't choose outside of those parameters of going towards pleasure and avoiding pain. And everything that we do is done for an egoistic reason, and it doesn't matter how it looks on the outside. The degree to which our egoism controls the events in our lives is, well, it's evident. Just look at the world, and you'll see the kind of relationships that people have with each other. They look very nice on the outside, but what's really happening is that any kind of giving, anything that appears to be an altruistic act, is really always a calculation for self-satisfaction. So even, giving of great amounts of money or expenditure of personal effort to help the poor or to heal the sick, there is a calculation there that pleasure is going to be gotten by the person as long as they're working within the will to receive. Either it'll be in the form of honor from others, or it will be in the form of a pleasure from thinking that I'm superior to others, even if I don't tell them about it. It's always a calculation sought out to receive pleasure into the will to receive. It governs everything, and as long as we function within that, it is a constant pressure that allows us to easily be guided from one situation to another according to an inner pressure. And the outer pressure is in our environment. And our environment consists of all of the stages in our development prior to where we are, which include everything that went before, and also the situation that we find ourselves in at the moment. So let's just go over what our situation is in terms of where we came from. In our original first state, as we were created in the creation of a creature, the four faces of direct light, in this condition, there was one soul in relation to the Creator, with no boundaries on that connection. This is the collective soul, Adam Harishon, and actually this is the state we still live in, except that we have lost any sensation of our true condition. As this state was lowered through a number of phases by the force of development, which is the development of desire and also the development of the will to receive rather than the will to bestow, it arrived at the independent desire of the creature. Now, this is reflected in our experience this way. This state is experienced rather as a kind of a matrix, a lattice that contains 600,000 independent parts, individual souls, all related to each other. The relationship one to another and the influence between them is enormous. They are all interrelated, actually, in the way that they were related in their original state. But the awareness of this relationship is lost to each of the individual parts. Anything that is done in one of these parts, which is an individual desire, is felt through this interconnection in every other part. That is, there is an influence, an enormous influence that is felt throughout the entire system, given the condition or the inner action of the desire of any one of these. So nothing inside here actually functions as an individual. We perceive that it does. This is our sensation of it as a result of the hiddenness of our real state from us. And rather than feeling the interconnection, what we really feel is something more like this, that a person exists independent of others, right? And is a user and an exploiter of others. But really, the condition that we feel is more like this. I'll do it like that. Connected to nothing. But the truth is that this collective soul is our environment, and it puts tremendous pressure on us in the form of our society. Societal pressures, the way that everything in our environment affects us. So much of what we feel, and we'll see how much, comes from this and not from this. So, as you can see, we are influenced from all sides, inside and outside. And yet freedom is still achievable even in the material world in this lifetime, and not in some other world, as most religions say. But it takes a very special effort, and the effort is to rise above our nature. And that'll become clear as we go on. Let's look at how this happens in the natural world. Animals can show us that there is a quality in nature that really hates slavery. It hates a lack of freedom. If you take an animal and you put it into captivity, especially a wild animal, it will weaken, and in most cases it'll die. And even our pets, domesticated animals, you've got to make a deal with them. You know, you've got to compensate them for their loss of freedom by giving them a lot of food, giving them a certain kind of shelter and a lot of attention, and sort of building up one side of the equation for their will to receive. Otherwise, they simply will not see what's going on as anything but a loss of freedom. And this is the way that nature is constructed. Freedom is a powerful force, and everything is guided towards that freedom. Animals don't make mistakes because they're functioning completely within the law of nature. For instance, you'll see a cat can jump up on a table or up on a wall, and if you look at it really closely, and I've seen this with slow motion cameras, the cat will leap, but there's a point at which he seems almost to be lifted and just land precisely on the place. It's as though he's in the flow of some kind of energy that just takes him there. And animals don't make mistakes because they're not moving by knowledge. They themselves are not evaluating anything. An animal that's born knows what's good for it to eat, it knows where to find it, and none of this is coming from intelligence. It's all instinctive. It's all there ready for the animal. And even if it looks to us like an animal is making a mistake, like maybe one animal is eaten by another, for which animal is it a mistake? You know, the one that was eaten or the one that did the eating? We see it as a mistake because we are partially embedded in that level of animal, that a part of us is an animal, and we can't see completely outside of the system. And we apply that aspect to it, and we believe that we are seeing something losing and something gaining, where really the animal itself is working completely within nature and is part of a system that works like a cell within a body, or an organ within a body, cell within an organ, organ within a body, that is working only for the fulfillment of the whole of the organism, not for the individual. And everything that happens, including when it's time to live and when it's time to die, and all that is done in agreement with the law of nature, because the animal is locked into it. So you can see how completely predetermined everything is on that level. That's actually what we call instinct, is predetermination of that level. You can look at the condition of an animal, at least a biologist can, look at where an animal may be geographically, look at the time of the year, and be able to determine, according, say, to the age of the animal and all of those factors, what the next condition of that animal will be, because we know the influential factors of the animal. And we can see that to a certain degree because we're above that level of the system. But we can't see that about ourselves. And the fact that we don't see that is really what we call free will. For the human, free will really consists of a lack of information. It really consists of ignorance. Because we cannot see what the influencing factors are on us. We instead have the sensation that there really aren't any, that all of these conditions that we have are kind of random, they're a matter of fate, and that a person has their own individual response to everything and completely makes their own way. This is really not to sense where the influences are on us. So we have this vague sort of sense of free will, but we can't really define it. And we keep seeking freedom in all kinds of ways within the human system. And one of the clearest ways in which we can see this sort of turnover and seeking of freedom is in the evolution of political systems. What happens in organizations of people is that everything is fine until we feel that there is some kind of restriction on our ability to fulfill certain desires. The system seems to fail us, and then there's a kind of a revolution within it. There's a necessity for change because we are feeling a kind of coercion from the outside. And so we see the turnover of all kinds of systems over time, from hunter-gatherer and that kind of a system to that's simply not enough, and it doesn't allow us to fulfill certain kinds of desires. So larger organizations occur, kingships, and yet still the individual finds that he can't fulfill what he wants to fulfill. So forms of democracy occur, and this constantly turns over, but it's always an expansion only on the level of egoism. So even though we go through this process, it's a predetermined process, and we never really reach freedom because it's always on the level of the expansion of our nature. And the place of freedom and the point of freedom apparently is not there. It may be that this point of freedom is not vast as we think it is, that it's really one tiny determining factor, something very small in the scope of our experience. But it may be something small, but it's something extremely powerful and really all that's necessary. In Kabbalah, there is a law that goes, there is no coercion in spirituality. It's not possible to reach spirituality without freedom. In other words, a Kabbalist is not going to tell you, you must do this and you must not do that. The entire road to spirituality must be made of freedom. That is, you must feel free in it. The path itself must be free, and the goal itself has got to be freedom. And that's because you will only do what you consider to be good for you. That's the way that the system is built, and that's how we develop. That is, you'll only choose according to your desires. But the question is, where do your desires come from? Which ones are your desires? We are installed into this life. You find yourself in a family, you didn't choose the family. And yet there's all kinds of influences on you. Everything that you are, your character, is shaped by the values of your mother and your father, your community, your school, your set of friends, and everything that develops in you in terms of your personality, what you value, what you dream, what you suppose the limitations of things are. They're all defined for you by that situation. And you may, as a teenager, rebel. But that's not freedom either, because it's always only in opposition to those things that are presented before you, because you're not creating those things. You're merely responding to this set of choices. In other words, if you're going to have a dream about what your life is going to be, it's going to be one of a number set before you. It's like choosing items on a menu. And even when you leave that sort of situation of your school and the heavy influence of your parents, and you step out to make your way in the world, you still find that that organization and pressure of society is still affecting a person. And the things that we find valuable are the things that are advertised to us. And if we choose to value something else, it will be also one of the things on the menu. And this is a matter of us working both according to our inner programming, that is, we're going to choose according to what we feel is desirable to us, according to bitter and sweet, what do we want and what do we want to avoid, and we're going to choose it out of the things that are presented to us by society. So, if I act according to that programming, is that freedom? Even our most intimate thoughts and desires, geneticists are now able to show us actually are not ours. They're all predictable. From a tendency towards drug abuse or alcohol abuse, to whether a person would be a criminal in nature or whether they would be a law-abiding citizen, and even states of elation that we consider to be religious experiences can be determined by positioning probes into the brain. So where is the freedom of those desires arising from an individual I? That's natural science, and that shows us how those things are determined in our egoistic nature. But Kabbalah shows us something even further than that, in a kind of spiritual genetic code in which we are programmed not just in one lifetime, but over a multitude of lifetimes. And our development is completely laid out for us in the system of Reshamo, that is, remembrances of the stages in which we descended from the root of our soul. So if all we are just robots fulfilling either our egoistic programming or our spiritual development, where is freedom in this system? The I of the person, the point of freedom, does exist, but not in everything. We are completely subject to the forces that develop us internally and externally. But just as there is a means in Kabbalah to use our inner created nature, which is the will to receive, and transform that into the will to bestow, there also is a point of freedom that exists within the environment around us. There is a way of learning how the system of influence works and harnessing it to catapult us out of it into a higher level of life, into a bonding with the Creator. And that element is the root of our soul. The root of our soul is the desire to climb outward towards freedom. And it's not influenced by any of the things of our egoistic nature, including all of the environment, internal and external. If we cling to this parameter, this one parameter, if we cherish it and develop it, and develop only by it, then we can ascend above that level of influence. And the Kabbalists give us a means of doing that. Next time, we will continue our investigation of freedom by looking at an article called The Freedom by Bala Salam. And in this article, it shows us exactly what the parameters of influence are, how they work on us over a multitude of lifetimes, and how to harness that one small part of it that will allow us to leave our limited perceptions and enter the spiritual world and fulfill the thought of creation, which is bonding with the Creator. See you then. again, and welcome to Kabbalah Revealed. I'm Tony Kozenek. We're continuing our look at free will. In our last lesson, we viewed it from the point of view of a person's experience in this world and try to find the point where we actually had some freedom of choice. And we found that we actually exist in a predetermined system. And that our sensation of free will really consists of our lack of knowledge about the forces that determine and guide things in our life. While in a human court, it's possible to appeal to the judge and claim that you don't know the law, and maybe the judge will give you compensation. When it comes to the laws of nature, there are no loopholes. The laws of nature function whether or not we know them. Since that's the case, then we better find out what these laws actually are, how they function, how things are guided, what is predetermined in the system. And once we know that, then we can search for that point of choice and see if there is a way that it's possible to influence the system, to guide it towards what we would call freedom, something that would be real choice. So let's look at the laws. Bala Salam wrote an article called The Freedom. He wrote it in the early part of the 20th century. And this article explains how every form that we see in our reality takes its origin from the instant of creation. And from that point forward, it develops by means of 4 components. And those components have brought it to the form that we see it in now and will bring it eventually to its perfection. It explains the laws and the forces that work on everything in creation and where the point of freedom exists. So let's look at the article. He starts the article with a quote from Midrash Shemot Rabbah 41. Carved, herut, on the stones. Do not pronounce it carved, harut, but rather freedom, herut, to show that they are freed from the angel of death. Now this is a curious statement. Why does he start this whole article out on freedom, speaking about the defeat of the angel of death? It's because he is examining the force of development and the laws of nature, not just from the physical level, but as they apply to all levels, that is, all of our reality. And he is showing in this article that the same principles that work on the lower levels of nature also work on the higher levels of nature. And when we are connected to those and understand them from their source level, that we can begin to see what life and what death actually is. So in order to appreciate the full scope of what Bala Salam is speaking about in this article, we need to know something about the nature of forms in the higher level of existence. The Kabbalists tell us that all the generations that have existed in this world are really the same generation. That is, they are the same soul. And this progression that we call life and death is merely a change of the dressing on the essential self of the soul, which is a collective soul. That is, that the body may come and go, but that has no effect whatsoever on what it's dressing, that essence of the soul. And that we have progressed over a lifetime which consists of thousands of years. In other words, the collective soul of Adam Harishon was created as a collective, descended to this world in time and space, and then began its development, experiencing its search for freedom and its search for satisfaction through the pursuit of desires. And it experienced itself as a bunch of individuals not related to each other. And then, since it didn't reach its goal of freedom, it moved on to another stage and came back as another generation of apparent individuals working to find freedom through the pursuit of this desire, wealth, and so on and so forth, passing through what we call history, passing to the point of the destruction of the Second Temple, where Kabbalah was hidden, and where they pursued power and honor, and then moving on to the point where we are now, which is the point of 1995, after Kabbalah has ceased to be hidden, and we enter a period of collective correction. That is, for the first time, we are capable of sensing ourselves as that collective, as what we really are, as our source. And from this point forward, our development needs to be along the lines of our actual essence, to reach this desire not for knowledge, but for the spiritual. And this is what Bala Salam explains to us by taking a look at a particular example in nature. He uses the example of the seed of a stalk of wheat. So he tells us that what our me, that is, what the human consists of in general, is 4 factors. 1, he calls the bed. 2, the conduct of cause and effect related to the bed's own attribute, which remains unchanged. 3, the internal cause and effect that change as a result of contact with external or alien forces. And 4, the cause and effect of alien forces acting on it completely from the outside. He explains it this way. A, the bed, meaning the first matter, related to that being, for there's nothing new under the sun, and any event that will occur in our world is not existence from absence, but rather existence from existence. It is an entity which has stripped off its former shape and taken on another different from the first, and that entity is regarded as the bed. In it lies the strength destined to be revealed and determined at the end of the formation of that emergence. Therefore, it is certainly regarded as its primary cause. So this first factor is called the basis. It is called matzah. It is the essential basic material that we are created from. This was given to us by the Creator, it's installed in us, and it defines our entire essence. And it is something that the Creator made from nothing. It is existence from non-existence, something from nothing. And this is our first material, and it was made before what we feel as ourselves. And Bala Salam uses the analogy of a seed, because we can only really understand a process if we can view it using our mind and senses from above. And so we know that we can take a seed and we can cause its death, so to speak, its decomposition, by placing it into the soil, in which case it will completely decompose. It will become dust. It will lose its life and the shape, the form that it had. But at the end of its decomposition, it then becomes another form of life. And that essence, that matzah or basis, which is pure information, is transferred from that seed into the new form. And the new form will be a stalk of wheat. So we see that the essence is not controlled in any way by the dressing. It's something that can dress or undress into new forms of life. Now, if we can begin to see that same system working in regards to our level, then we can begin to see what is occurring and to be able to direct what is occurring. We may be able to find a point by which we actually have some kind of choice in the process. And this basis, this matzah, consists of the origin and the mentality of all of our ancestors. That is, their mental qualities plus all of their accumulated knowledge. And these will be felt in us in our new form of life as unconscious tendencies. They start out that way, and they can be expressed either positively or negatively, depending on the necessary development of that next stage of life. And these consist of our own mental, emotional qualities, plus physical qualities. Now, this basis cannot be affected by us in any way. This is created before us, and we have no influence on it. Bala Salam continues, the second factor. It is a conduct of cause and effect that is related to the bed's own attribute, which does not change. Take, for example, a stalk of wheat that rots in the ground, as a result of which many stalks of wheat grow. Thus, that rotten phase is deemed the bed, meaning that the essence of the wheat has stripped off its former shape, which is the shape of wheat, and taken on the shape of rotten wheat, which is the seed that we call the bed, which is now stripped of any shape. Now, after rotting in the ground, it has become worthy of dressing in another shape. That is the shape of many stalks of wheat destined to grow from that bed, which is the seed. And it's known to all that this bed is destined to become neither cereal nor oats, but it can only be compared to its former shape, which has now been stripped off it, being the single stalk of wheat. And although it changes to a certain degree, both in quality and quantity, for the former shape was just one stalk, and now there are 10 or 20 stalks, and in taste and appearance too, but the essence of the shape of the wheat remains unchanged. Thus there is a conduct of cause and effect ascribed to the bed's own attribute, which never changes. That cereal will never emerge from wheat, as we've said, and this is called the second factor. So how can we understand this? Here we have the first factor, the matzah, the essence of the creation or of the form. Inside of the matzah, we have those qualities that make up its essence, the ones that will continue to be incorporated into new forms of life. This is the first factor, the basis. This is number one. Around that is what he calls the second factor, or the conduct of cause and effect that is related to the bed's own attribute. Now, what that means is that there exists a program that is related only to the qualities within the essence of the basis. It's like a computer program, and it's aimed directly at those qualities within the essence, and the program is a program of development. So that this is actually part of the predetermined aspect of a form. This is also something that cannot be affected whatsoever. It is a fixed system, and it's designed to work precisely on the development of those qualities within the essence. And this is the second factor. And as the first one, we cannot influence these things. These are determined by the Creator. There is complete and total creation and management of these two levels. And this essence, through the effect of this program, will be brought through its full development, through time, space, and everything that it has to develop into its final perfection. The next two factors, the third and the fourth, are external to what we've just seen. They're external to the soul, and they pressure us by developing us in a way that we feel is against our will. Bala Salam continues. The third factor, the inner cause and effect. It is the conduct of the inner cause and effect of the bed that change upon encountering the alien or external forces of its environment, meaning that we find that from one stalk of wheat, which rots in the ground, emerge many stalks, sometimes larger and better than was prior to the sowing. Therefore, there must be additional factors involved here that have collaborated with the concealed force from the environment, meaning the bed. And because of that, the additions in quality and quantity that were absent from the previous form of the wheat have now become apparent. Those are the minerals and the materials in the ground, the rain and the sun. All these operate on it by allocating from their forces and joining in with the force in the bed itself, that through cause and effect have produced the multiplication of quantity and quality in that emergence. We must understand that this third factor joins in with the internality of the bed because the hidden force in the bed controls them. That means that its effect is only felt because it touches something in the inner program and the quality itself. That is, if you did the same thing of, say, water and wind on a stone as opposed to a plant, it would produce nothing. It has to be related, cause and effect, according to the inner qualities. So there are still extreme specifics in the effects external to the soul that are related directly to it. That at long last these changes all belong to the wheat and to no other plant. Therefore we determine them as internal factors. However, they differ from the unchanging factor in every aspect, whereas the third factor makes changes in both quality and quantity. So this third factor, the externals, can affect the development in a partial way. It doesn't affect the essence. It just affects the quality, whether it will develop in a good or a bad way, according to things that surround it that influence the program of development. In other words, you could create an experiment in which you put a seed in the ground and two seeds. One in an area where there was no sun and not enough water, and one that had prime circumstances where there was plenty of sun, water, the right temperatures, good soil. And what you will see is you'll still see the same plant growing. It'll still be wheat, but it'll either be good wheat or bad wheat, or it will be many or few stalks. And this is the third factor, the external forces or the alien forces that combine with the essence and its program. So we can have these forces of weather and sun and minerals and so on. And these, again, are directed at the program. So it affects how well the program will work on the basis. This is 3. So this is external to the soul. It's felt as an alien force, something against our will. But we can't determine what are the forces that are going to work on this program. Certain forces enhance the program, others have no effect on it. In other words, we don't have any direct control on this third factor either. The fourth factor. It is a conduct of cause and effect through alien forces that act upon it from the outside, meaning that they do not have a direct relation to the wheat, such as minerals or rain or the sun, but they are factors that are alien to it, such as nearby plants or external events, such as hail or wind. And you find that 4 factors combine to the wheat throughout its growth, and each particular situation the wheat is subject to during that time becomes conditioned by the 4 of them. That the quantity and the quality of each state is determined by them. And as we've portrayed in the wheat, so is the rule in every emergence in the world, even in thoughts and ideas. The entire chain of transformation, of the reaching of freedom, is intended to occur by the thought of creation within one lifetime. And this is called the end of correction. And until that occurs, we find ourselves continuing our development, returning to what we call a physical experience. This is all predetermined for us. There's only one thing that we can change in this entire system, and that is the speed of development, so that it can be achieved in one lifetime. This fourth factor is the one thing in which we have influence. That is, the entire system of predetermined development is affected by the place, the environment in which it occurs. So a person can have very negative or weak first and second factors, and still, by placing these factors and this system of development and its essence in the proper environment, the quality of development can be enhanced and its speed can be accelerated enormously. This is our one small area of freedom. It's tiny, but its effect is enormous. So what is it that is under development by these four factors on the human level? It's only intention, it's thought. How can we be responsible for things for which we have no control? Our initial thoughts and deeds are not under our control. Only our ability to choose an environment. When does this become important? At the point at which the point in the heart appears within the soul of a person. Then the Creator takes that person and places them in an environment that will allow all of these factors within the soul to develop to perfection. And this environment must be an environment of the human level, that is, it must be made up of thought and intention. Therefore, the correct environment, the one thing that a person has to do in choosing that is to choose the right thoughts, that is, the correct map of reality and the course towards its fulfillment, that is, the correct books. A person needs the correct group of friends, ones that have exactly the same desire to fulfill their development within one lifetime according to the correct thoughts, and a guide that will give them the correct method to take them through that. When the point in the heart appears, the Creator brings a person into that environment made of those forces and factors that allow the soul to complete its transformation within one lifetime. Join us again when we go further into the correct books and the correct method. See you then.